1. My friends and I back in college would not necessarily call ourselves ghost hunters, but we like to go out into the woods at night and find old abandoned houses, graveyards and the like, which are plentiful when you live in the middle of nowhere. A common place for us to go was a park which is very far into the woods and had an old covered bridge that was supposedly haunted. As an explanation as to why this bridge seems so scary, there is a light at the end of the bridge, and the shadows of the trees form what looks like a figure. When you sit in the middle of the bridge, the wind makes the figure look like it is moving towards you. To the unsuspecting visitor, this can be a frightening experience, so we like to take our friends here to freak them out. To set the scene, it was late summer on a Wednesday night, probably around 2 a.m. We were all on summer break and had nothing going on, so we decided to take a couple people down to the bridge to give them a good scare. This area is not easy to get to. There are a lot of steep hills and rocky roads. It is very secluded. So, as expected, there were no other cars on the road. We got down to the bridge as we had so many other times before. It was tough to see the light at the end, but there were definitely plenty of shadows around, so the scare factor was still pretty high. So, as you're supposed to, we parked our car in the middle of the covered bridge and turned our lights off as well as our engine. Immediately, the people we brought with us saw the shadow figure approaching our car. We obviously tried to play it up and act like we saw it coming towards us as well, to continue to scare them. But something was wrong this time. The figure seemed a lot more lifelike, not like a tree swaying in the wind. It didn't feel like an illusion at all. I looked over at my friends and could tell they noticed something was different this time too. It was at that point that I noticed we were no longer looking at the same shadow figure at the end of the bridge. This one actually moved directly in front of our car. In a panic, I turned on the headlights because it was becoming a bit too real. Once the lights came on, the figure did not disappear and did not stop inching toward our car. There in front of our car was a person in an all-black hoodie and black pants, hoodie over his head, looking down at the ground. After the lights came on, he kept inching toward the car at a snail's pace. A prank, I thought. Someone saw us come down and was familiar with the story and wanted to mess with us. We opened our windows and yelled, "Hey, you got us, that's pretty good." He had no reaction. Thinking he was just trying to stay in character, we laughed it off and backed out of the bridge and started heading back up the hill. There was a parking lot up at the top of the hill, still pretty deep into the woods, maybe a minute or two drive from the bridge. We decided to head up that way to gather our thoughts and sort of process everything that had just happened, since adrenaline was still running pretty high. We got to the parking lot, which is normally about a quarter full on a busy weekend during midday with hikers, as it's a pretty popular hiking spot in the area. But 2 a.m. on a Wednesday should have this lot totally empty. Upon pulling in, every spot was full. Considering the park closed at dusk, this was a disturbing discovery. We parked in the middle of the lot, trying to figure out what was going on. I grew up just minutes from this area, and the amount of cars in the lot was probably the equivalent of the nearest town's entire population. We sat in the lot for about 5 to 10 minutes, just talking to each other, trying to figure out what was going on, when 2 German shepherds came running down the hill. They stopped at our car briefly, and then continued running off into the woods. The girl that we had brought with us had a look of horror on her face and told us that we needed to leave. Confused and still a bit concerned, I agreed and left the area quickly. She put everything together. She said that cult activity in the area around us was very high. German shepherds are commonly an animal they use for sacrifices. I do not know where she got this information, but all I know is that it's been about 5 years. I never saw her again, and I never went back to that bridge at night again. 2. So little backstory. In 2003, I was a 16-year-old employee at an urban clothing store here on the south side of Chicago. At the time, I had a manager who was in his early 20s by the name of Anthony. Anthony was pretty arrogant and obnoxious, but overall he was a pretty cool guy. I used to kind of give him shit and tease him when it came to approaching the ladies, because he always seemed timid or too aggressive. I was and still am a ladies' man, so yeah, I was being an asshole. After working at this place for about 3 months, Anthony asks me if I would drop him off at home. It wasn't far from the direction I was headed in, so I dropped him off maybe twice a week for the next month or so. Now let me tell you, these car rides were uncomfortable. This guy, as much as we spoke at work, would not speak and sort of just kept looking straight. It got to the point that this awkwardness went from entertaining. I was 16, most awkward people are interesting to teenagers, to straight creepy. Fast forward 3 to 4 years later, I'm watching the news as they go into detail of a horrific crime committed by a Comcast installation worker. Apparently, the Comcast worker entered 2 homes he was due for an installation, raped, beat, and strangled 2 women. The real unfortunate thing is this happened on 2 different occasions, and after the first murder, the gentleman was arrested and questioned, but released and sent back to work, which allowed him to strike again. As the picture of his mugshot flashed on the screen, I froze. It was Anthony. Now, growing up on the south side of Chicago, I have grown up and befriended a fair share of people who grew up to be murderers. But this took the cake. So, Anthony Triplet, let's not meet because that means I'm in jail with you. 3. This story took place no more than 3 years ago. For a little background, I was with my then boyfriend from the UK, as he had come to visit me and meet my family in beautiful Colombia. We haven't seen each other for a while, so I decided to buy a couple of plane tickets and take him from one plane to another at the very next day of his arrival. I did a lot of research, since I wanted to show him a place that not even I knew, and that we could both explore together. I chose this set of islands, near the northwest of the country and at least 10 hours away from my hometown. The plan was to get off the plane, take a cab to a small coastal town, and from there, take a boat to the chosen island. We made it to the small regional airport on time, took our bags, and started asking around where we could take the cab that will take us to our next stop. We found a cab service that took us along with other people in a van, and after a couple of hours, made it to the small fishing town. After getting off the van, we noticed that the sun was setting, and no boat will take us to the island at that time. So we decided to find a cheap hotel and sleep for the night. After walking around asking in different hotels, we chose the cheapest one. It was a little gross, but we didn't care. We were all about the island that waited ahead. On the next day, after a delicious yet humble breakfast, we took our bags to the port, found a boat, and it took us to the little island we wanted to go to. Our time in the island was lovely. We were almost alone, and stayed at an eco-friendly hostel that took our breath away. The white sand beaches were clean since no more than 50 tourists were at the island at the time, and most of them locked inside a 5-star hotel that we found walking down the shore. After 5 magical days on this beautiful paradise, we were heading back. Money was running low now, and since I was the one paying for almost everything on this trip, I was struggling to keep up. We made it back to the fishing town somehow, and we still have yet one more day left. We searched again for a nicer hotel this time, somewhere we could actually shower and relax, and then got bored indoors. It was just too hot to stay inside, so we decided to go explore. This town was small in comparison with other Colombian cities or towns, but at the same time quite overpopulated. More than 2,000 people lived there, and even though they all knew each other, it still felt a little crowded. The beaches in this town were not as nice as the islands, especially because the sand was dark. Ocean had brown and green-colored waters, and it was dirty. Since the amount of tourists from the other small town nearby was at an all-time rise, we did not want to bathe in those waters, and started asking around where we could go for a nicer beach nearby. Many people agreed that there was this beach called La Playa del Francés, translated as something like the French guy's beach. And apparently it was cleaner, solitary, and romantic. We did not need to hear any more. We took a simple bag with our phones, sunblock, water, towel, wallets with money, and a hotel key. I was wearing this bag as a crossbody since it was an ethnic kind of bag we use in Colombia called mochila. And it's basically one big ball of fabric with a strap sewn or cut on opposite sides. It has no way to close up, so imagine you are wearing a grocery bag, but the straps are just one and it's way longer. We started walking. The sun was scorching, and the sand felt like burning even through our flip-flops. I must admit I was excited about exploring, but at the time many people warned us to be careful, that there were a lot of alleged robberies in the area, but this is an everyday thing in my country, so I didn't pay no mind. Every time I saw a guy or a group of guys, my heart would flutter. It felt like having tiny little panic attacks every time you see a face coming out of the dirt roads. This was a very poor town, so I wasn't concerned about how the people looked raggedy and dirty. However, my heart fluttered here and there when I saw people, especially once the tourist area started fading out in the background, and we just kept walking towards the port and the more empty beaches. We noticed the sand getting cleaner, less trash, and also less people. Every time less. We saw this group of guys talking, and they stopped as they saw us and stared. I tried to remain calm, and tried to look like I wasn't out of my mind, and asked with my strongest voice, "Excuse me, do you know how far is the French guy's beach from here?" One of them scoffed and replied, "You are a ways far. Maybe you should take a cab or a motorcycle." We did not want to spend yet more money on unnecessary expenses. I had already started using my cards, since I was out of cash, so I just looked at him and said, "Okay, thanks. We'll keep walking and see what happens." We uncomfortably waved and kept walking. We noticed that as soon as we left, they did also, and were talking between themselves, but it wasn't possible to hear what they were saying as they were walking on the opposite direction. We kept walking through the beach. We saw the port coming up to us, and the beach in that area was closed. We were forced to take one of those dirt roads parallel to the beach and into the neighborhoods. What we didn't know is that we were walking right into the slums. My boyfriend back then was a very cheap guy. I'm not saying everyone from the UK is, but this particular guy was. So we started fighting once I figured we were really far, but he didn't want to chip in for a cab ride. I got really upset and said, "You know what, screw it. I have covered for everything on this trip, and I'm fed with it. We are heading back." He started arguing something like, "I already spent my money as well," to which I interrupted with another snappy comment, and so on. and so forth. The fight got a little heated from then on, partially because of the intense heat, and partially because my feet hurt since it was so hot, and I started walking in front of him, getting further and further away from him. As we fought, we headed back toward the beach where we had come from, and just before we reached it, I saw this young, scrawny guy standing next to a bush, right in the corner where we had to turn. I paid no mind since I was so upset and focused on fighting with my cheap-ass boyfriend. When we started getting closer, I noticed the guy was staring at us, and I just thought it was because we looked exotic. A very white, blue-eyed foreigner, and the dark-skinned Colombian with the long hair. I made it to the corner first, and I was about to mutter a weak "Good afternoon," since it's a common courtesy in our land to do so. But the words died in my mouth as the guy quickly stood forward and jumped me. The movements were fast, and I only saw glimpses of what was happening. There was another guy hidden behind the first one, and he also came forward, but this one went straight to my very scared and frozen in fear boyfriend. The first guy tried to grab my bag as he pulled this huge knife from behind his back. It was a long and wide silver blade, and it shone against the burning sunlight. He kept saying something like, "You fucking gringos, give me the bag." By this time, I fell on the ground. The blow didn't do anything to me though. I was too concerned about keeping my hands around my bag, holding it tight to my chest. That bag held inside my brand new iPhone, the same I just started paying for. Thoughts raced through my head. What was my boyfriend doing? The guy kept trying to pull the bag from underneath me as I cried, "No, please, no!" And he said, "Let go or I'll cut you, bitch." I was rolling on the ground, hugging the bag, as I saw the shine of the knife again, but this time it went under me as he cut the strap and held the bag as well. He yanked the bag and I stood up as soon as I could just to see him getting on a bicycle, as the other guy was just blocking my ex. This made me hate him at this point. The stupid idiot was just held behind the other guy without even touching him. He was blocking him by just standing there, and my idiot ex just stood there as if he was being held captive by some invisible box. The second guy turned around to see his friend getting on his bike, and rushed to do the same on another bike parked behind the bush, where they had been hiding. I did not hesitate. Somehow, I wanted to fight for that phone. It's hard to obtain such expensive items in Colombia, and I've worked really hard for the past couple of years to get a brand new one. I was powered by pure hatred. I hated them. I hated the country. I hated the government. I hated the fact that society's conditions have created such violence, such poverty and deprivation. I felt sick of it all. I wanted to bash their heads in. I wanted to be violent as well. They quickly took off on their bikes, and I quickly took off running behind them. My flip-flops flew in the air as my first few steps hit the scorching, hot dirt road, and the tiny rocks cut and hurt the skin on them. I was fueled by hatred then, and I ran like I have never run before. At the same time I was screaming. There were people just standing on their precarious house doors. Some of them even came outside as they heard the commotion. I was screaming, "Stop them! They just robbed us! Help! Help!" I never thought I would say such a silly word. Believe me, in Colombia, people prefer to be robbed and head home feeling defeated afterwards. Hell, I've done it as well, many times in the past. See my story called The Woodsman, to see how much of a wimp I was back then. This time, I was determined. I was tired of being a pushover for lousy crooks that were half my age. I would give it my all, just as I had grabbed that bag like I was grabbing the edge of a cliff. I ran like I was being chased by Jason Voorhees. I ran and screamed for 2 blocks, and many people started screaming as well and pointing at them. But no one did nothing, and soon enough, They started gaining terrain in front of me. They then turned around one of the corners down the road. I kept running as I saw them turn yet again on another corner. By then they were too far, and I couldn't follow anymore. I was heartbroken. I stopped running, and I threw myself on the ground and started pounding on the dirt road, crying, screaming hysterically. I couldn't believe they robbed me so easily, in such a stupid way. How could I explain this to my parents? How would I even call them? People started walking towards and surrounding me. My idiot ex-boyfriend arrived a few seconds later, jogging slowly, trying to comfort me, but I just wasn't having it. I cried as people asked me, "What did they take? What did you have in your bag?" Between tears I cried our phones and wallets. But at this point I realized phone robbery is so common it wouldn't matter at all. So I decided to lie. And our passports. He's from England. And now how is he gonna go back? They all started murmuring, while a huge, luxurious truck appeared at the end of the road. A very heavy woman yelled right away, "They took their passports! There's the mayor! There's the mayor!" Some other lady asked, "Anyone know who it was?" Then I heard another voice saying, "It was Ms. Rosario's son. I saw him." The sounds were now getting confusing. There were at least 20 people around me trying to comfort me and asking questions. The truck slowly rolled closer, and the heavy lady pretty much jumped in front of it. She was screaming too. "They took their passports. That's why we can't get enough tourists here from other places." And more people started complaining to the mayor. I slowly stood up and looked at the man behind the wheel. He was a very heavy fellow, shaved head, no facial hair, and with a stern look on his face, he said nothing. There was a guy next to him. He seemed to be his secretary, as he did all the talking. He asked where we were staying at, what they took, and who it was. I told him I didn't know who they were, but the heavy lady interrupted me and repeated, "It's Mr. Rosario's son. It's Ms. Rosario's son. The ones from the slums." The mayor remained quiet and just staring. The secretary then said to a couple of guys standing in the back, "Take them back to their hotel," and then looked at me. "We will let you know if we find anything." After that they left. The two other guys took us back to the hotel on the back of their dirt bikes. I felt defeated and weak. When we got back to the hotel, we explained on the front desk what had happened and the reason we didn't have our key anymore. The owner, an elderly gentleman, walked us back muttering encouraging words and opened the room for us. I threw myself on the bed and cried. My feet were bleeding and my head felt like exploding. My idiot ex tried to console me, but I just scoffed and told him to let me be. I had to make phone calls now, cancel my cards, my national ID document, all of that complicated stuff. A few hours passed, I calmed down, took a shower, and started thinking what I was going to do next. Then I heard a dirt bike, and after that a call to our room. The front desk gentleman told us there was someone looking for the gringo couple, so we went outside. It was the heavy lady, riding a beat-up dirt bike. And boy was she upset. She kept saying that she hated when things like this happen, and that the mayor needs to step up and make the town safe for tourists. Because that was their whole income right there, selling snacks, knickknacks or beer to the tourists on the beach. She then saw the mayor's truck coming down the road and told me, "When he comes closer, we'll demand that he does something or I'll do it myself." The truck came closer and once again. When the window rolled down, I saw the stern look on that dark face again. He said nothing, but the secretary did. "We found the bag, but it didn't have any passports in it." And then he pulled up my mangled bag. Strap cut, but it didn't excite me. I muttered something like, "Oh yeah, we checked and the passports were actually in the room, thank God." He gave me a weird look and said, "This is all we could recover." Sorry about that, but people should really have warned you before you entered the slums. I merely took the bag and felt the weight way lighter. I was not optimistic at this point. I muttered a quick thanks as the heavy lady kept talking about how this could never happen again. This is their town, and they need the tourists to come visit and blah blah blah. I just held the bag in my stomach, as if its warmth would make stop feeling that emptiness inside. But it didn't. I then started walking towards the room again. I opened the bag just to make sure what they have left in it, and oh surprise, cherubs sang as I saw, at the bottom of it, my phone. With no case, just the plain phone, my cards and documents. No wallet, of course. And the room key. I felt like screaming. I took it out, and it was on plane mode, which made me assume they'd try to unlock it and couldn't since it had a passcode. I couldn't believe my luck. Up until this day, I still don't believe I got it back. It's so unlikely. It's like finding a green sapphire. The gentleman on the front desk came towards me and said, "They were probably looking at your every move ever since you made it back from the islands. They knew where you were and when. Be careful in the future, would you, sweetheart?" To what I only replied with an automated, "Yes, sir, will do." I can't believe my screaming, crying, lying, and hysteria had worked on my advantage. My then boyfriend and I left on the next morning, counting our blessings, and headed back to my hometown. We didn't last long after that trip, though. He just wasn't strong enough for me. I was already feeling invincible. I was a badass. And I wasn't going to be scared ever again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 139. Before anything else, I would of course like to say thank you very much to the individuals who allowed me to use their stories. Incidentally, in story number 3, there was a story called The Woodsmen. I may have done a reading of that, because I do know I've done a reading by that same woman. I believe in that situation, the woman was out with her boyfriend and the dogs. They were in the woods, and there was some shady characters that held them up and robbed them. I can't remember what video it was, though. It was a few months back. And the lady was kind enough to allow me to do a reading of her second story. If you want to know who Anthony Triplet is, if you click through in the link in the description there, there's a link in the original story that takes you to an article talking about the crimes that he had committed. And with that, I think I'm going to head off now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening. Oh, actually, no, before I go, movie recommendation for Halloween. One of my favourite movies. I watch it at least once a year. Not specifically Halloween themed, but it is ghost themed. It's called High Spirits. It stars Peter O'Toole, Steve Guttenberg, remember him, Daryl Hannah, and Liam Neeson's in it as well. He plays, I'm not recommending it because Liam Neeson's in it, I just happen to like the film. He plays an Irish ghost in there who, this sounds horrible, but it's a comedy film. He murders his wife every night because she doesn't want to sleep with him because he's quite repulsive to her. And until this cycle is broken by the American tourists visiting this Irish castle. Fantastically hilarious film, in spite of all the murder, but wonderful film. I'd highly recommend that this Halloween. And if you want an older film recommendations, I can definitely recommend one I saw many years ago. In terms of quality, I guess it doesn't hold up over the years, because it's from the 70s or so. It's called The Fiend. The effects work doesn't look great in comparison to what we do today, but it's still quite an entertaining film. It's about the spirit. It starts off with the image of this kind of red spirit, I believe it was, glowing red energy, and it inhabits the grave of this man, and it gets out, and it looks all kind of horrible and decayed until he absorbs the life out of people, and that keeps him looking younger and human looking. And it's his story. It's A very interesting film. I remember seeing it when I was probably too young to actually see it. And I think that'll do for Hellfreezer's movie recommendations. Okay, so I'm going to go now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.